Hello everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. Today I'm joined by Dr. Oran Smith. He's the Senior Fellow with the Palmetto Promise Institute, and we're excited to talk everything Educational Scholarship Account, or better known as ESA. So Dr. Smith, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you. Great to be with you.
Awesome. Can you first, before we get into our conversation, tell me a little bit more about the Palmetto Promise Institute?
Well, the Palmetto Promise Institute is what used to be called years ago a think tank. That's an organization that comes alongside elected officials and other people sort of in the policy area to generate ideas and to find out what's working in other places and then to adapt them for South Carolina. Because otherwise the elected officials don't have a lot of staff, so they don't really have a way of finding out some ingenious ideas from other states or things that are working in other places. So we go out, we do that research. Some of it is pretty simple. We just adapt what other states are doing. In some cases, it has to be totally different for the state of South Carolina because we do things differently here in some cases. So we're just there in support. Washington, there's a lot of groups like us, but in South Carolina, there just aren't many that do this kind of work. So we're very happy to be doing it.
Well, awesome. I'm really excited to engage in this conversation with you. And I know that Palmetto Promise has really been at the forefront of this educational scholarship conversation and really working to get the legislation passed for that. So I just wanted to spend some time today and ask you a few questions about the ESA.
Right.
So can you just give us a brief overview to get us started? What exactly is an ESA?
Well, first thing, it has nothing to do with individual families saving their own money for college. The reason I say that is when I talk about ESAs for the first time, like at a Rotary Club or maybe even sometimes in the State House, somebody will say, "Oh yeah, those are great. They help you save for college, and parents can put money away, and it's tax-free." That's not it. That's something else. The ESA, and we call it an education scholarship account, used to be called education savings account, but that made it get confused with the Coverdell and the other types of savings for college. What it is a unique ability to take the dollars that are being appropriated to a specific student. That will be a specific student in a specific school with specific needs in many cases, because a lot of the funding that flows to a student is based on his or her needs. Are they gifted and talented? They come from poverty? They have some kind of a special need where they need special therapy, this type of thing. So what it does, it takes those funds for that specific student and it puts it on a card. I should grab, a card here. I've been using my card that I use to swipe at the gas station. We have these very popular gas station in the upstate called Spinks. And this is my Spinks card. It's got a little stripe on the back. But what you do is, if this were an ESA card, the dollars that the state appropriates would be on this card, in essence, would be in an account. And then when I'm designing a specific program of education for my child, I would use this card anywhere that it was accepted. So it might be for therapy, it might be for a tutor, lots of different kinds of vendors, maybe even a public school district, a private school, there'd just be a wealth of providers that you could use to craft that specific program for your child based on his or her needs. And that ability to craft and to create that unique educational experience is really the selling point of the ESA.
Awesome. So you mentioned these dollars being put on a card. Where does the money come from for an ESA?
Well, there's three levels of government primarily that fund public schools in South Carolina or anywhere. And here in South Carolina, there's a federal government piece for certain programs, local government, the school districts. We've got 82, really 81 now school districts. They have certain funding. And then the state has funding. And the state has funding that comes from the EFA, the Education Finance Act, and just a wide range of other funding pools that all flow down to the individual student. It can be very confusing. In fact, we have another study that we've done analyzing all these streams that flow into the funding of schools. But what it does, it only takes the state funding. So all the funding that's generated from the local level to go to schools would stay with the school. Any federal funds that come in, they would stay with the school. So in essence, the school is getting money, at least the local money, and to some extent the federal money, for a student who's not going to be there. The student is going to have taken the state money and gone elsewhere. So to us, it's good for schools as well, because in essence, the same spending is being done for the student. It's just they're going to be in a different place.
So when people say that an ESA would take away funding from a public school and it would harm children who are still in that public school, what do we say to that?
Well, what I would say is the public school is no longer providing all of those services. So the expenditures, the expense, now some expense you might call stranded. It means if you have one fewer student in the classroom, it doesn't necessarily mean that the need to fund that overhead shrinks by that percentage. But in essence, it does work that way, because if the student is not there, then the funding that's left over, that local funding, it's spread amongst the students that are still there, and the state funding goes with the student to fund those services somewhere else. So in essence, it's just a different place the money's being spent. It's still public money. It's still being spent for schooling. It's just not being spent in that specific classroom the way it was the year before. Now, one thing I should mention about that just occurred to me, and that is, in order to get an education scholarship account, you have to have been in public school the previous year. So this isn't designed for students that are currently in private school or have other schooling options that they are enjoying. This is for someone who is in public school and they feel that the public school for some reason is not meeting their needs. So they use the card to get tutoring or to go to a private school or to have other ways of learning.
Right. So you mentioned one of the ways that someone can access this is that they would have had to have been a part of a public school. What are some of the other criteria to be able to qualify for an education scholarship account?
Well, that's interesting. When we were designing this Education Scholarship Account Act, and I'm looking over it, it's 3681 is the number of the bill in the legislature, H 3681. Making sure that that's correct as I click around here. But yes, 3681. So we could have designed it as a state any way that we wanted to. We could have said it's only for students that have specific needs, and there's a long list of those needs that have been diagnosed with a certain type of disorder or need. Another thing is it could apply to poverty. Just a lot of different ways it could have been designed. And those are the two that we settled on as the larger groups that would be eligible. And that is in some way identified by a doctor or a professional or a school official, and it's delineated in the bill as having those specific needs. And those are all built into our State Education Funding Act. Schools actually receive a weighting of additional funding for each student that meets one of those requirements. So special needs, but also poverty. So if a student is classified by the state of South Carolina as a pupil in poverty, and the way to think about that generally is free and reduced lunch. If a student is eligible for free or reduced price of lunch, that generally gives you the idea of what we call, in this case, poverty. So special needs, poverty, and then we reached out specifically to foster families and adoptive families and military families. So if a person is the child of a military household, someone who's been on active duty, and in many cases this is helpful because military families have to move around a lot. So this is very helpful to them as well. So those are our big groups are poverty and special needs, or exceptional needs, we say sometimes, and the smaller groups are military, adoptive, and foster families.
Okay. A lot of times when people hear education scholarship account, they might also think vouchers or tax credit scholarships. What's the difference in some of those programs and how does ESA differ from them?
That's a really good question because tax credit scholarships had been around for a good while, and we have a program in South Carolina that's based on the tax credit scholarship. Basically, what happens there is to say if I owe the state government money in taxes, then the amount of money I owe in taxes, I can donate to an organization that then makes the allocation of those dollars that I gave that otherwise I would have been paying to the state. Those dollars can be sent to schools to help children that have special needs. In South Carolina, it's a special needs only program. The challenge with that is every dollar that goes into that special needs scholarship, those dollars have to, in essence, be raised. Someone needs to go out and spread the word to the accountants and to other people that prepare taxes and to people that have generally a lot of liability, maybe just a little liability. Anybody that has any state tax liability needs to know about it so that they can donate their tax liability to the organization so the funds can be sent on behalf of the kids. There's a limit to how much of that you can do. I mean, it takes people, it's what they do almost full time, is spreading the word about the tax credit. With the ESA, you're actually taking the dollars, not that are donated, but the actual state dollars that are appropriated for the child in the school. Those dollars are the dollars that are going to support the child. So in essence, the dollars are following the child. With the tax credit scholarship, it's just general state money that eventually goes to a child. But with the ESA, it's a specific amount of money. It's the dollars that child would have gotten in school. And because of that, getting that number up to a higher and higher level so that more and more children can be served is not as heavy a lift as having to go all over the state of South Carolina telling people, hey, there's this tax credit scholarship and there's plenty of money, that the state's allowing to go into that tax credit. So you need to donate all of your tax liability or the highest percentage allowed by law. And it has a limit, and you start to bump up against that limit. But with the ESA, the legislature just says this percentage of kids that are eligible or this number of kids that are eligible. They have a number of ways they can do it. And then it's easy to adjust every year. And you know exactly what the money is. It's coming from the state and had been allocated for that child.
So, do you have an idea of how many students may be able to take advantage of an ESA program? Just a ballpark.
Well, I would say the best way to think about it is maybe the percentage of students. We have a very high percentage of students in South Carolina that are on free and reduced lunch. So our calculations are at least 70% of students that attend South Carolina public schools right now would be eligible. So that's a very high percentage. And then the bill itself reduces the eligibility to a percentage of that percentage that goes away eventually after a few years, so that every child that meets those requirements would be eligible for a scholarship. The first couple of years, when it's ramping up, only a certain percentage of those children would be able to have the scholarship. So you would run out of scholarships at a certain point. But we hope, it's written into the bill that eventually there wouldn't be any limit, that any child that met those requirements would automatically get a scholarship.
But even in this first phase, we're still talking about a large number of people who would be able to take advantage. I know that some of the argument or complaint is that, oh, this is being designed for only a small portion of students to be able to take advantage of, and we're still creating something that an elite group would be able to use. But we're ultimately saying this can make a huge impact for a large number of South Carolina students. Is that correct?
Right. In fact, kind of merging a couple of the things that we've just talked about together, but because you have to have been in public school before, And because it's directed at kids with special needs and kids in poverty, you can tell it's really designed for kids that have a lot of economic challenges and that are currently in public school, and for some reason the parents may not feel that that school is giving them the type of education that fits their needs. And there's a lot of definitions of what fits a child's needs. Some schools may not have advanced math or advanced science, or they may not have a program specifically for maybe a child with autism. And there are a lot of different, every child is different. And I think the ESA, holding my card up again, what the ESA is all about is making or having a system that's adjustable depending on that child's needs. And clearly the goals of this program are directed primarily at those that are really needy. They either have financial issues in their family, or they have special mental or developmental needs. So, and they have to have been in public school. So this is not a Cadillac program for rich kids, who otherwise would be in private school. It's for the truly needy and challenged. And we hope that some of the districts that sued the state because they felt like their students were not getting an adequate education, that was known as the Abbeville School District case. We're hoping that those districts would enjoy such strong support amongst parents that schools would pop up and be created. We've already heard that some religious schools are saying that if the ESA were to go into effect, particularly if it had no limits, then they would be willing to build schools all over the state that would help out with those populations in particular.
Great. And of course, we want to create more choice for families because education isn't one size fits all, and we need more options that parents can choose from. So
right.
That it's a fairly complicated process legislatively and getting a bill passed, but what can you tell us about what's happening on the legislature with ESAs? I know there's many steps to making sure it happens, but where are we at this point?
Well, when you look at the way our government is designed, I always almost have to go into a little bit of a history lesson, and that is that old King George, when we rebelled against King George, we rebelled against government that was maybe a little bit too efficient in taxing us and having power over us. So in our governments, and I think South Carolina's government is in particular this way, you have to really get a lot of support from a lot of different areas, and it is a very long process to get something done. So you've got to get it through the House subcommittee, full committee in House, floor, Senate, go through the Senate subcommittee, full committee, Senate floor. Then, could the governor veto it or not? All those complications that go with how a bill becomes a law. But this one, we're hoping that very shortly, before the legislature has to start taking up the budget, the state budget tends to take a lot of their time. We're hoping that we can get a hearing in the subcommittee level, and that's a very small group of legislators that hear the bill for the first time. And it's the subcommittee level where you can actually have testimony. You actually have real South Carolinians show up and talk about what they would like to see in the legislation. And we're hoping that will happen pretty soon. In the House and the Senate, we've got two bills that are going opposite directions. So we're hoping whichever one gets traction, that will be what we call the vehicle to become our bill that will actually pass. So we're working at both directions, from the House side and from the Senate side.
So you mentioned testimony from real South Carolinians, and immediately I think of our parents and other concerned citizens. So what advice would you give to those who are really interested in the education scholarship accounts, whether they have children in schools or will have children in schools, or they just want to be supportive? What are some of the things that they should be doing at this point?
Well, I think learning more and more about the bill and what impact it would have on them and their families. The My SC Education website we would recommend, and then the Palmetto Promise website. In the old days you would say www.palmettopromise.org, but Google it. We're Palmetto Promise, and that will take you to our site, and it has a special section called Education Scholarship Accounts, and you can actually go there and learn more. There are 3 or 4 different little short papers, 2-sided papers that you could look at, or you can read it online. And then there's actually a way that you can sign a petition to the legislature asking them to take the bill up. Now that's not, we're not marching on the State House demanding, hey, we have a petition, but it's just a way of gathering support, so we give the legislature an idea that there really are a lot of people that are supported. So once a person goes to those 2 websites and learns about it, then sign up, be on our list, our email list, and then when the hearing comes up, we can let you know. You may want to come to Columbia and sign up and testify and give your ideas about school choice and experiences you've had with your children and what you would like to see the legislature pass.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Smith, I want to thank you so much for sharing your insights about the Education Scholarship Academy. Looking forward to this gaining traction and coming to pass here in the state of South Carolina. I want to let all of you know that if you have any questions or comments regarding this video, please leave them in the comment section. I'll also make available our website again, as well as my email, and you can email me directly with any questions you have. So thank you so much for taking the time to. Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoyed it. Appreciate it.